Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. We are doing our series on building a drawer. This is episode number 4. Last time we had some trouble where we had to go in there and fix a bump in that top. Now, a couple of you made some comments. One was that the back was going to get jammed, if you'll remember. We made that fix with a shoulder plane that was narrower than the piece up there. So there's a little bit of a ridge, but we don't have to worry because the drawer back, show you, the drawer back sits lower than the drawer side so as not to drag on the underneath. So that's not going to be a problem, but I may go in there and fix it anyway. Somebody else, several of you actually suggested why didn't I use my rabbiting block plane, and I could have and should have. I don't use it a lot. Never thought of it, but in hindsight, it would have been a much better idea. Yeah, you win some, you lose some. Okay, so these have been temporary, partially fit top to bottom, meaning in their width. Now we got to go in and do their length, and I'm going to have them the same length as these. So I'll just start by squaring up the front edge. This is the critical part. This is the part that if you do it right, when you build your drawer, and I'm going to take the time to actually show you this. There's not much more satisfying when this happens than when this happens in terms of building stuff. So you assemble a drawer or you assemble a box that's dovetailed. There's obviously a sequence that has to be paid attention to because of the way things go together. Dovetails only go together one way. So I would assemble this corner first. Then I would typically put this piece down into that corner. So now you've got the 2 pins sticking up here. And the last step is you have to assemble the final side or tailboard on 2 corners at the same time. So you butter them all up. You put this one in, and you always get it started by hand first, and then just give it a slight tap to seat it. Now, when you come over here, if you have to move the 2 pieces this way or that way in order to get them to line up, you've already lost that perfect fit, and you're going to have to settle for something less than perfect. But if you come over here, and you literally have to just push down because this is already perfectly lined up, which meant this corner and that corner, pardon me, the end of this board, the end of that board, repeat there, we're all done right. Everything lines up perfectly, drawer fits, and it is awesome. But it takes a little bit of work. So that's what we're walking through now. You can't hurry it. You've got to do it right. Got to make sure your shooting board is squared up properly. So here's the outside. This is the left-hand side of the drawer. This is the inside. When I cut this piece, I want to have this, which is my bottom, referenced against my fence. But the first thing I have to do is cut a little chamfer on the end so that I don't tear off fibers when I come in here. Now, when I do that, it creates a little gap here, but if you notice, there's also a gap back here, which means the piece was a little bit out of square. I got to make sure that that gap is going to be wider than this gap, or else what I did over here isn't going to be enough to protect these fibers in the process of getting this piece squared up. So I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to take a little more off of this, turn it over, and now if you look, this gap is obviously wider than this gap, so I know I can take the entire process, or I can square up the entire corner without fear of blowing past that little chamfer I made. Now, the good news here, this is the tailboard, and these outside corners are going to be cut off anyway. So it's not as critical on this piece as it is going to be when we do the pin board or the drawer front and the drawer back, because those corners must be preserved. Now, I want one final pass on this. I wasn't 100% happy with the way that stopped, so I'll do one more. I like to have a continuous shaving. You can feel it, even though you can't see it because it's kind of broken up. All right, so that's the front. That one's done. Same thing here. I want to finish it with the finished bottom against the fence, but I have to turn it over first to cut my little chamfer. Flip it over. Check to make sure the chamfer is deeper than any out of squareness at the opposite end. Now, if you're new to a shooting board, there's several things that have to happen all at the same time. You have to keep the board tight to the fence, which the action of the shooting board will do that. You've got to get it laying flat on the shooting board. You have to keep your plane from tipping, so you don't want to be leaning one way or the other. That's why I always have my hand right here at the widest spot. You have to keep the plane tight against the fence, because if you allow it to move over, you lose your square setup. Of course, you have to push it forward, pull it back, and perhaps the more difficult part for people is you've got to keep the board fed into the plane, so you're constantly cutting, but you can't push this harder than you're pushing this in that direction. Do all that and you got it right. Okay, let's just, now if it weren't for me being able to reference off of this already finished drawer, I would have to go in here and determine based on what my drawer front is going to be like. So what I mean is this. Because this is not going to change dimension this way, I can use, excuse me, because this is not going to change dimension, instead of having to have a drawer stop up here, I can use the back. So when that bottoms out at the back, I need to have this sitting. I don't want to push it in there because I can't get it back out. I need to have this sitting in whatever the amount of my end lap. The end lap is the part right here that covers the end of the tails. That wants to sit flush with the front of this cabinet. So that's how I determine the depth or the length of this piece. Now, the advantage is I get to take it right off of here. So we'll set that on there. And the reason I'm doing it, I want these to look identical. When you open the two drawers, I want them to look absolutely identical. And I want that end lap in particular to be the exact same size. So I'm just going to lay that on there. And then I'll come back here with my knife and somewhere where I can get a bit of registration. Now I got to use where's my headgear, Jake? Shoot, I don't know where it is. I need some more light. This Holly sometimes is like looking at a picture where it's a camera's taking a picture and it's too hot. So there's my mark right there. Now that's a little too much material, so didn't I already cut these once? Here I am doing it again. That's too much to plane. I'm going to saw it. And that's about, 1/32 of an inch away from my line that I'll eventually use the shooting board. I'm going to use my joinery crosscut. Now, should we at this point say, if you look on this right corner, it'll give you a link that you can go and check out these saws. I'm learning. Excuse me just 1 second. All right. Now, the nice thing about a really good saw is it allows you, in some cases, to actually make the cut, the final process. In this case, I need to have a finished surface, so it's got to come from the plane. But it's nice to be able to cut fine enough that you don't have to remove a ton of material in a much slower process using the shooting board. Okay, now that mark, unfortunately, is on the wrong side. So this is going to be a lot of flipping back and forth. This is my bottom. So actually, you know what I can do is I can carry that down So referencing off, always referencing off of the bottom. I'm going to put my shoot, we can do that too. This is made by IBC. And they're nice and precise. Check that corner. Now what I'll do is just make a mark all the way to the bottom. Now, I don't need to go all the way around, because what I can do is cut my chamfer right to that. Flip it over, and now simply plane down to that chamfer. One more pass. And you can see, if you look real close, I don't know if the camera can pick it up or not. There's my chamfer, there's what's left. So I've planed right to here. So I should be able to get one more pass. I always say one, it usually ends up being two or three, but at this point I will do one and stop and check. Okay, just so that you see, there's my chamfer right there. So I'm not gonna risk taking another one, because this piece, if you notice, does not get removed like a normal tailboard. So I want to maintain that corner. I don't want that being chipped off. All right, that one's done. Now I'm just going to use this one to copy onto this one, but the first thing I have to do is go in, and it looks like that's already been done. Maybe that was the one I did. Check it and see. Yeah, it is. That's perfectly squared up. So now we just go in here. Make sure we're keeping them in the right order. Top right, top left. Get a surface that I can trust. No debris. Set that on there. This is another key factor in getting your drawers so that they are perfectly square. Pieces have to be the same length. They can be different widths. That's not a deal. That's not a factor. Okay, this is the bottom. So this will allow me to actually see my line when I'm shooting it. I will go in, come over here about a 30-second or so. Now, this is actually more of a cut for our other saw. We started making what's called a bench cross cut. I'm going to go over here just so that in my aiming down I don't end up hitting my bench. And I've got to make myself one. I say that because that would be more for making cuts like this. I tell people to save this saw for joinery operations. You're cutting off the shoulder on a mortise and tenon or anything like that. Okay, so there's my line. Now, this is the way we're going to plane. I'll flip it over, and what I'm going to do is just carry that to the edge. And I can see it. Sometimes I prefer, where's my clamp rack, Jake? Over here. I prefer to clamp that, put a clamp on my shooting board just so that it's one less thing that I have to control. Sometimes you can just push it up against the bench dog, but I find this a little bit easier. Now, I'm looking at this little knife mark on the bottom edge facing me. And I'll just go until I reach it. One more. Okay, now flip it over. Again, the all-important reference is the bottom edge. Make sure that lays flat. Interesting, when you look at this really close, when you have a knife line to work to, you can see right in there right now, the little bits start to crumble just as you're getting really close to the knife line. And it's easy to tell because what's nice about that is that tells you that you're really close, and that's when you have to stop or start taking even more careful passes. Okay, I'm right there. I got to flip this over and take another pass or two. Keep your plane incredibly sharp so that doing stuff like this is easy because the plane works extremely well and you're able to take off those small end grain shavings instead of just getting dust. Problem is, word to the wise, if you allow your blade to get dull, then you've got to advance it more. Now you're taking a heavier cut. You're getting dust, a lot of extra force. The more force you apply, the less control you have, and that's when things become frustrating. So easy to avoid. Stop, resharpen. Commercial. I didn't explain this to you, but I will. My sharpening station is sitting down here at the end of my bench and down low. And people often ask the question why, so let me take a second to explain it to you. If you try, first of all, freehand sharpening is the way to go. Why? Because it's a skill. If you're using a jig to cut dovetails, you really have nothing to brag about. You use somebody else's ingenuity to create a dovetail joint. Congratulations, somebody else. That's why I do them by hand. I want to have that ownership. I don't care if anybody else cares or knows. I like to look at that and see that in terms of satisfaction of something I was able to accomplish. Sharpening is the same thing. It's a skill that you want to acquire. If you try sharpening freehand at bench height, here's what happens. You've got your blade or your chisel, and you're making these little circles or figure eights. I find circles are a lot easier. But you realize right away that if I continue to work on this one spot, I'm going to wear it out. So to this motion, I have to introduce this motion. And most people don't do more than one thing at a time very well, myself included. And in the process of trying to do this and this at the same time, it ends up being a mess. What I discovered was if you drop your sharpening station down to, now there's my knee, and there's the height, so that gives you a relative sense of where we are. If you drop it down here, the first thing you do is you get to change your pivot point from wrist all the way up here to shoulder. So I lock my wrist and lock my elbows, and all the pivoting comes from my shoulder. Well, I find it's much easier to control or hold that precious angle for those 10 seconds that I need to, doing it like that. The other advantage is, because I'm sitting down, I'm leaning over, while I'm doing these circles, instead of having to introduce another motion to my arm, I can just lean forward and go from heel to toe. While I'm doing this, I cover the entire surface area. That's the reason for the low set. Now, it's not terribly comfortable, and if a lot of people have bad backs, so if that's the case, make sure you get stones that sharpen, that cut really fast. You don't want to be sitting here for 5 minutes. Sharpening process is a little over 30 seconds, and if it's taking you more than that, and you're using the same stones I'm using, that's the only thing I can comment on, then it's your technique that needs to be brushed up. Watch some of my videos. Better than that, come to a class and we'll teach you. Final thing I want to say is that this end of my bench doesn't get any use. I'm always working along the front. I'm down here on this end because this is where my tail vise is, but that end doesn't get used. So I leave my sharpening gear right here. It's always available. At any time I can drop what I'm doing or stop what I'm doing. I'm 3 or 4 steps away from a new edge. I don't have to go searching around the shop trying to find a flat spot, find the gear, and away I go. And take it one step further, let me tell you what I use. These are Sharpenings. I think they're the best. I don't care about the cost. Yeah, I know some people are going to whine about that, but I don't care about the cost. That's not a one-time purchase. You'll eventually wear them out, but you're going to get enough years out of them that if you do the math, it's very little pennies on the every time you use them. I finished with a 16,000. Now, Jake and I vary a little bit. He likes to use the 500 grit to start with. I typically use the 1,000 when I'm traveling, and I often use my Trend diamond plate. Why? It cuts fast and it's inexpensive. Jake's been hauling out this Sharpening lapping plate a lot lately and using that, so I come back to using it as well. Great system. So you start with a core stone, either 500 or 1,000, and go right to your finishing stone, which is a 16,000. 10 seconds, 10 seconds, a little bit on the back. The Charlesworth ruler trick, which is I've always said is the smartest thing I've ever learned about sharpening, is a 3-second procedure on the back, and you're back at sharpening, or you're back at planing. All right, now what are we on to next? We got these both to length. I'm going to verify that. Now I'm told that you can feel about 1,000th of an inch variation with your fingertips. And if that's the case, this is under 1,000. Funny that those snipe marks are in the exact same spot. Okay, next move is to lay out these tails. How are we for time? We're at 22. Shoot, should we stop there? All right. What we'll do then, this is going to air on Sunday because we've got our episode, our live workshop tonight. This will air on Sunday. On Monday, we're going to go in and we will lay out the dovetails on the front and on the back, and we'll most likely get to cut all 4, the tails. People ask about gang sawing, meaning doing 2 at the same time. I do that. However, you're going to notice that I do a little something different when I cut the tails on my drawer front, which require that I do them individually. There's pros and cons to doing them at the same time. When I did these over here, and not that I care any less about them, but I had a lot of them to do, and it's shop furniture, so it's not like something I was going to put in a gallery somewhere. I gang sawed these, put them together, and saw 2 at a time. So same amount. It takes very little. In fact, you wouldn't notice cutting through an inch of pine versus cutting through a half an inch of pine. So in the time it takes to do 1, you've actually done 2, which means you've got a drawer completed. So it definitely speeds things up. But I'm going to do them 1 at a time in this case. Anything else? Oh, what else do we? Oh, so just another little tidbit. So we're working through the process. We are going to host a virtual dovetail workshop. So I'll tell you just a little bit about it. It'll be filmed like this in 4K on YouTube. I'll be here at my bench. When I do teach the class, the way we go through it is we do the introduction. I usually do the whole thing at first, so you get a mental picture of what's going to happen. And then we'll start, and we will go through a series of exercises, sawing exercises, chiseling exercises, fret saw. And then once most everybody has kind of got that down, we're going to go start the dovetail. And we'll do 2 or 3 steps. We'll stop, let everybody catch up. We'll do 2 or 3 more steps. We'll stop, let everybody catch up. And we'll go that until we're finished. There'll be several of us, all qualified. Super Dave, Super Dovetail Dave, we didn't change his name. Jake, Colonel Luther, and myself will all be available. So if those in the class need help, whether we're going to do it through Skype or through FaceTime, we'll be able to work with you one-on-one and get you through the process. I think we're going to do it so that you'll be watching on YouTube to get that clear picture, but we're going to use another service so the audio will be there so everyone will be able to hear at the same time. Instead of having to type in your questions, you'll be able to just ask them. That's the plan. Of course, there's going to be a cost. I can't employ 4 people for nothing. But it'll be an opportunity for you to learn dovetails without having to leave your home. So in this time of lockdown, if you want to call it that, at least we'll be able to give you something to do and develop a skill. So when you come out of this, you may be cutting perfect dovetails. And I'm going to close by having Jake come in here, and I'll just show you this just to show you what's possible. I have 2 samples up here. I usually don't get to bring sample dovetails home because the guys who cut them aren't willing to part with them. But this was Philip Gustafson. combat wounded vet, came to our first class, and that's his first ever dovetail that he did within the first, what was it, Jake, within the first half hour?
No. It was longer. We cut off.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, we won't tell them that. But that was his first ever dovetail. Did you win close on that? Now, what you need to know is that was cut, that was assembled without any test fitting. We're not allowed to test fit. And there was no pairing. That means he sawed the tails, he marked the pins, he sawed the pins, he put glue on it, and he assembled it. And that was the result. That was probably one of the best we've ever seen. However, not to be outdone, if you come over here, you'll look at Marshall Rommel, another combat wounded vet from the from the Washington State, and Marshall was in the same class, wasn't he? Yeah, must have been something about that class. Have a close look at that. Now Marshall has 4 tails in there. Philip has 3 tails in there. Could be an east-west thing, I don't know. But fantastic work. Proud to have it hanging behind me, and we've seen thousands. This is the norm. For every 12 people in a class, we will see 8 or 9 at the end of the day producing joints like that. So I'm here to get you excited. We'll give you more details as we go, but just want to keep it fresh in your mind. You're going to need tools. Do we have a tool list out? Actually, you know what? We do have. We'll put a link up here to a YouTube video we did on the tools you need to do the one-day dovetail workshop. And then we'll give you plenty of time to acquire everything that you're going to need. You're going to have a bench, a decent bench, and a decent vise in order to participate in the class. Pretty hard to do this otherwise. Although, actually, I think what we'll do is we'll do a separate YouTube sometime in the near future on a makeshift vise that will actually work. That actually might be a good thing because then everybody can participate as long as you have some kind of a sturdy surface. We'll show you how to make one. All right, stay healthy, relax. Enjoy. This is going to be aired on Sunday, so just chill. We'll see you again on Monday.